All right, good afternoon, everyone. It is 12:30. It's time to start. I'm going to make a few little marks here real quick. Okay, so it is Wednesday. It means it's a downward slide from here. So what we're going to do today, let's take a look at the page. Okay. Once again, I want to remind you guys to always check the announcements to see if there's any new announcements that come up, just in case. We'll go over to modules. And today, all right, we're going to go over the proper and safe operation of the joiner. There is a copy of the major tool identification sheet right here. If you need it, you will be taking a quiz the second half of this class. Let me let somebody in. So that covers everything that might be on the quiz. This is going to be one about the joiner. I'll show you what I'm talking about. All you have to do is open it up, scroll down until you find the joiner, and all the text right here has everything you need to know in order to do well on the quiz. All right, so there's that. Okay, so we're gonna get going on the joiner here. First of all, the main purpose of the joiner, okay, is to flatten the face of a board and or to flatten, straighten, and square the edge of a board. Okay, it's one of the first machines you will use in getting a piece of material ready for use in a project. Okay, so the first thing you will use it for is going to be flattening the face of a board. All right, and there's a couple different things that can be wrong with a board when you get ready to flatten it. Okay, so first of all is a bow. All right, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. Let me zoom out of that a little bit. Okay, a bow, all right, is basically a board that's got a shape like this to it, okay? The other thing that can be corrected on the face of a board or with a board, a joiner, is twist. And that's, I don't know if you can see this, but instead of a bow, when a board does this number and it twists, okay? And you can tell the difference on the joiner itself. We're gonna zoom back in. Okay. By placing it on one of the surfaces, the in-feed table or the out-feed table, when you look at it, if it's got a bow, you put it on one surface, it'll be touching at both ends and there'll be a gap in the center. Put it on the other surface, flip it over, and it'll rock front to back. Okay? That's basically a bow. A twist, when you see it in a board, something like this. So it's not necessarily going to rock front to back, but if you put your fingers on each opposite corners, it rocks this way, okay? So it's going to rock like that. That's a twist. In other words, this board's got a little bit of a twist to it along its length. So both of those can be corrected by jointing the face of the board. Now, there's a couple things you got to remember, okay? How you present this material. Hold on, I got people coming in late. Excuse me for 1 second. How you present your material to the machine, in other words, how you run it through, where you keep your hands, where you keep the pressure of your hands, makes a huge difference. So the first thing is how you present a board to the joiner. Okay, so zoom this back out. So what you've got is a situation, let's say you have a bow, okay? There's got a situation like this, all right? You would never put this surface down in the joiner. If you do, you've taken a chance of that board rocking as you're going through, and you're not going to correct the bow. What you want is like this. In other words, the board should touch at the front and the back, okay? It shouldn't touch in the center, all right? If you do it like this, you're taking a chance on it just rocking as you go through. Like I said, it's not going to fix it, okay? So what we've got is a couple boards here. We're going to try and correct some bow. Let's see which one's the best one here. I got two of them here. So I've got this little guy here that has a little bit of bow. When I hold this, when I put my finger, let me zoom in on this so you can see it. When I push down on one end, whoops, maybe the other end rises off the table, okay? So when I push down, you guys can see the gap right here, okay? If I flip it over, the only gap you're going to be able to see is in the center of the board. So this is how I want to run it through the machine, not like this, okay? So one of the things I want you guys to start to think about, and I'll ask you guys to do when you finally come back, which we don't know when that's going to be honest with you, okay, is one of the things I want you guys to do is be sure and mark every surface of all your boards before you get ready to start to mill them. So we take this thing, mark up all the surfaces, and there's a reason for that. Go figure, right? There's usually a reason. And both ends. Okay? So the point behind, the reason for that is that during the course of milling this board and getting it prepared to use in a piece of furniture, in other words, getting it to the proper thickness, getting it to the proper width, and getting it to the proper length, okay? Every single surface that has pencil marks on it should no longer have marks on it. In other words, you're going to have to treat every single surface on this board throughout the process of getting it milled, okay? So here's our bow. All right, I've got it set there, right? I don't have it set so it's rocking on the table. I have it set so it's sitting on the table. So the way you place your pads, and you will always have to use push pads on the jointer, especially when it's face down. You can never put a bare hand on the face of the board when you're jointing the opposite face. It's a bad situation. Where you place your hands and how much pressure you put on the board are important. If I put these pads right kind of centered in the board, and I push down as hard as I can when I put it through the jointer, all I'm doing is pushing that bow out of it, okay? I don't want to force this board down and flatten it as it's going through the cutter head. It's not going to do any good because it'll just bounce back up once you take the pressure off on the other end of the jointer, okay? I also want to keep my pressure on the leading edge of the board. In other words, my rear pad, all it's really doing is helping me feed this into the cutter head. It's my front pad that's holding the board down, okay? You also want to listen to the machine. You should be able to hear when a board's done being jointed. Don't make any more passes through the joiner than you absolutely have to. So we're going to go ahead and run this. I want you to listen to the machine. I think it's only going to take one pass. So I had a consistent sound throughout the whole thing. And when I take a look at the surface of the board, all my pencil marks are gone. Okay, so I'm done with that surface. I can set it back down here, and I should not be able to get any rocking on it. Okay, obviously if I set it this way, the bow still exists on the other side. Excuse me, so once this bow is taken out of one side, one face, the next step is to go to the planer. The jointed surface will go down in the planer, basically because the cutter head on the planer is above and it's going to remove material from the upper surface. So we run it through the planer, which will then create two parallel faces, and the board will be a consistent thickness. Okay, so that's a bow. A twist is a little more tricky to get out. That one's got a lot of twist. This one's got a little bit. Let's see what we got here. So a twist, I'm not going to notice rocking front to back, but side to side. So if I push on this back corner, what you should see, I can't tell. What you should see is it just about touching right here, but it off the table on this side. If I push here, it's going to be off the table on this edge and touching back here. So it's rocking like this. So here's another situation. We want to mark up the surface. Now the trick here is you keep your pressure at the same spot throughout the whole thing. So what I have here is I'm going to put this, and I'm going to put most of my pressure along this edge where it's touching. Okay, there's a gap right here. There's no gap here. So I'm going to place my pad towards that edge. I'm actually going to kind of push down this way a little bit with the pad. I'm not going to have the pad angled, but that's where my pressure is going to be, towards this edge of the pad. My rear pad is just helping me get it through the machine. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on the rear pad. In fact, once I get the front pad over here, I can just about take that rear pad off of there. But I keep it on just to help with control of the board. So we're going to see what we have here. It's a little harder to tell by the sound with a twisted board when it's done. I don't think this one was completely done. Let's take a look at it. Nope. So you can actually see, I don't know if you can see, but right in this area right here, okay, it hasn't been hit. I've still got some pencil marks here and I can see the board, it hasn't been milled right there. So we haven't completed it yet. So we're going to run it one more time. So here's the part that didn't get, so I'm going to keep my pressure in this area. I'm not going to try and push down here because it's going to raise it up on this side. You should actually be able to see that. If I push here, it's just going to raise the other edge up. You can kind of see it flopping around there, okay? So we'll try it one more time, see what we get. That's pretty much got it, okay? So I have no more pencil marks on that face. It's nice and flat on the table. It's not rocking corner to corner, not rocking front to back. That's what I want. So now it's ready to go to the planer with the jointed face down, remove some material from the top and get rid of any twist that's left in the top surface, okay? So that's jointing a face, all right? That's the first thing you're gonna do to a board after you've done a couple other things, right? You guys got to remember that the first thing you'll do with a piece of raw wood is you'll pull it onto a table, you'll draw your parts to rough dimensions that you expect to get out of that board, then you'll show it to me, I'll check it off, then you'll likely go over to the panel saw and cut it into more manageable pieces. You don't want to take a 12-foot board and try and joint the face of a 12-foot board on this joiner. Then we go to the planer. Then the next step is to come back from the planer. Now, once we've come back from the planer, we have a situation where over there, and I know exactly where it is. Once we come back from the planer, what we have is a board with two parallel faces, okay? The nice thing about that is this, all right? One of the things we're always concerned about in woodworking is grain direction. What I mean by that is the grain in a board always has a very specific direction. I mean, it can be all over the place. You can always read the grain a little bit. For example, I can see in this board, I don't know if you guys can see it or not, I can see the grain exiting in this direction. In other words, like this, okay? So if I joint in that direction, I'm taking a chance on catching these exiting pieces of wood and tearing it out. No matter what you're doing in this shop, whenever possible, you want to go with the grain. And that includes jointing, sanding, planing, chisel work, hand planes, things like that. You always want to try to go with the grain, okay? So the thing mark these. The thing that having both faces flat and parallel after coming off the planer is when you go to joint the edge of the board, prior to going to the table saw, okay? So you're going joint one face, plane the opposite face, come back, joint one edge, so that when you go to the table saw, you can place that long jointed edge against the fence, okay? The nice thing about having both faces flat and parallel to each other is this. If you have a lot of grain diving out in that direction, okay, and you only have one face on the board jointed, you didn't plane the other face, all right? If I put the board like this, I'm going to be going against the grain. I want to go with the grain, okay? So in order to do that, I have to flip the board end for end, okay? That's the only choice I have to try and go with the grain. And it's entirely possible that on the other edge of the board, it's coming out in the same direction. The nice thing about having a board that both faces are flat, I can turn this board any way I want. I can turn it this way and get the grain going the proper direction I want. I can turn it end for end. I can flip it any way I want. I can put whichever face I want against that fence. Because when you're jointing the edge of a board, you have to have a flat face against the fence. So now, having both faces treated already, it doesn't matter which face you put on there, they're both flat, okay? So when we go to joint the edge of a board, and I cut one earlier and set it aside, and I thought I did anyway. Here, we'll do one real quick. Hey, let me get this board ready. I thought I had one sitting over here already, but I guess I don't. Okay. All I'm going to do is put a little defect in the edge of the board. All right, so we flattened one face on the joiner. We flattened the opposite face and created two parallel faces using the planer. Now we deal with the edges. The first edge is always done here on the joiner. Okay, so I'm going to mark this edge. As best I can. Okay, now the same thing kind of goes for edges as it does for faces. I don't want to put this edge down. I want to put this edge down if I can. Okay, I want it touching at both ends, not in the center. And my arm's in the way, it's not working very good. Not in the center. Okay, I want it touching at both ends. So we've got it marked. Now this is a situation where the sound the joiner makes is going to be a really good indicator as to whether or not the job is done. Okay, so I want you guys to listen to the joiner. All right, so you should have been able to hear that it touched at each end but not in the center. You can see that our non-jointed surface that hasn't been hit yet is about this long, okay? Going from about right here to right here. My pencil marks are telling me for sure. So I got this much done, I got this much done. Let's run it again, listen to the joiner and see if we can tell when it's done. Now we've got about this much left to do. That sounded really close. Looks like it's done. I've got no pencil marks left. We'll take a look at it on the table itself and make sure we've got good contact all the way along the length of it. Okay, so now what we have is we've got three surfaces on this board that are done. We have both faces and we have one edge, okay? This one edge on the joiner, as long as the fence is square to the table, what we've created is our first two 90-degree angles. That edge to that face and that same edge to the opposite face, okay? So where we go from here is we go to the table saw, okay? And we'll put the jointed edge against the fence. It doesn't matter which face we have down in the table saw because they're both treated, they're both parallel to each other, so I can flip it any way I want. And then we'll end up ripping the opposite edge off and getting the board to final width, okay? So let's go over a little bit before I drop you in the quiz zone. I want to make sure I've given you all the info you need. So the main purpose of the joiner is to flatten the face of a board and or, let me get this up here a little bit. Hey, I went the right way. So the main purpose of the joiner is to flatten the face of a board, okay, and to flatten, straighten, and square the edge of a board, okay? That's its two main functions. The joiner can actually do a lot of other things. It can do rabbets, it can do bevels, it can do all sorts of things. But for your purposes, the two things you'll be doing on this machine are flattening the face and flattening, straightening, and squaring the edge of a board. Now you realize I didn't say squaring a face. You're not squaring a face. You're not creating a 90-degree angle when you flatten a face. The only time you square something, in other words, create a 90-degree angle, is when these two faces are parallel to each other and flat. When you joint one edge, you've just created 90 degrees there and you create 90 degrees there, okay? So there's a difference, all right? So another thing about the joiner is we only joint solid stock, hardwoods or softwoods. We do not joint sheet goods, things like this, okay? There's a reason for that, and it's a pretty good reason, whether you believe me or not, okay? There's a couple things you can safely assume about a piece of sheet goods, okay? Whether it's particle board or plywood or melamine or MDF or whatever it is. You can safely assume that the edges and the ends of these boards are already flat, straight, and square, okay? You can also safely assume that the faces of these boards are going to be flat. They're also parallel to each other. So we don't need to joint a face. It's already flat. We don't need to plane the opposite face. It's already a consistent thickness no matter where you measure it, and that means that the two faces are parallel to each other. We do not need to join an edge because it's already safely 90 degrees to that face, 90 degrees to that face, 90 degrees to that face, 90 degrees to that face. So you don't need to worry about jointing sheet goods. We do not joint sheet goods, okay? Another thing we don't do is we do not joint end grain, okay? What I mean by end grain, we talked about this yesterday. That's a face, that's a face, that's an edge, that's an edge, that's an end, that's an end. Face, face, edge, edge, end, end, okay? But this is face grain, this is face grain. This is edge grain, this is edge grain, this is end grain, this is end grain, okay? But on this piece, the grain's going this direction. So that's a face, that's another face underneath, that's an end, that's an end, that's an edge, that's an edge. But this is face grain, this happens to be end grain, okay? And this happens to be edge grain. This may be called an end, but it's exposing edge grain, okay? We do not joint end grain, and there's a couple basic reasons why we don't, okay? First of all, minimum length on the joiner is 12 inches. You cannot run a board through the joiner that's less than 12 inches long, okay? So this is fine. And what I mean by 12 inches, I'm gonna push this right, nope, I went the wrong way again, is you have to have 12 inches of your material in contact with fence or table, okay? In other words, the long surface needs to be against the fence and the table, okay? So you can do it like that, you can do it like that, you cannot do it like that. Two problems with that. This is end grain that's going to be jointed, and we don't have 12 inches of contact with the table or fence, okay? So minimum length on the joiner is 12 inches. So I cannot do this for two reasons. It's not 12 inches long, and this is end grain down here and up here, okay? One of the problems with jointing end grain, let's see if it's going to do it. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So if I can pick a board that might actually do it. So this we'll see if it'll work. Not real bad. But you can kind of see where the end of this board exited the joiner, there's some tear out. It splintered and took a chunk out. I've seen it take big giant chunks out of there before. But when we're doing that to end grain, you're taking a very good chance of ruining the corner of the board as it exits the cutter head. Okay. So first of all, it's not 12 inches contact with the fence and table, and it's end grain. We don't joint end grain. Okay. So material's got to be 12 inches long. We don't joint end grain. Last but not least, this red thing right here, this is the guard. Never, ever, ever move the guard out of the way while you're running the machine, okay? That goes with any guard in this shop. We do not move, alter, disable, remove, or bypass any guard on any machine for any reason whatsoever. If I ever see a student moving a guard out of the way or bypassing a guard or disabling a guard or not using it the way it's supposed to be used, you're gone. You will never step foot out here again. That's a huge, huge safety infraction. So just don't do it. You could get very, very badly hurt. All right. So real quick, I'm going to go back over these 5 things again. Main purpose of the joiner is to flatten the face and flatten, straighten, and square the edge of a board. You notice I didn't say flatten both faces. We don't flatten both faces on the joiner. We flatten one on the joiner, the opposite one on the planer, okay? Flatten one face and flatten, straighten, and square the edge of a board. It is not okay to push the guard out of the way when using the joiner. You can only use the jointer with solid stock. We do not put sheet goods through the joiner. Minimum length on the joiner is 12 inches. Your board must be at least 12 inches long to use the joiner. And we never joint end grain, okay? So here's what you're gonna do. Let's go back to the old canvas thing, whatever you wanna call it. We're gonna go to modules, okay? I'm gonna go over here and I'm going to activate this quiz. So it is now published. So what you're gonna do is you'll go ahead and take the quiz. If you want some help with the quiz, the machine identification sheet or major tool identification sheet is right here. All you gotta do is look up the joiner. It's got all the information you need. Take the quiz, okay? Does you no good to look at your score on the quiz. Well, I think it scores it as you go, so you'll know what you got, okay? Take the quiz, and then I want, once you're done taking the quiz, come in here, put your name in the chat window, and you're welcome to take off, okay? That'll be it for today, all right? So just make sure you take the quiz, put your name in the chat after you've taken it, and then you're welcome to get out of here, all right? Have a good day. It's hump day. We're on the downward slide to Friday. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you guys tomorrow, okay? I will be here pretty much most of the rest of the class, so if you have a question or have a problem or anything like that, let me know.